Officer Daniel Grayson was a name that carried weight in the quiet, unassuming town of Ridgewood. To some, he was a symbol of law and order, a man who took pride in keeping the streets safe. But to others, particularly those from minority communities, his presence evoked unease. It wasn't just his stern demeanor or the way he walked with authority. It was something deeper, harder to pin down, but impossible to ignore. Daniel had been on the force for 15 years, rising through the ranks, steadily. He prided himself on being tough and uncompromising, believing these traits made him effective at his job. His colleagues respected him, or at least they pretended to, but whispers about his behavior lingered in the station's break room. Some said he treated people differently based on their skin color. Others dismissed it as exaggeration, chalking it up to old-school policing. Still, no one dared confront him directly. The town itself seemed like any other sleepy suburb, where life moved slowly and crime was rare. Most residents knew each other by face, if not by name, creating an illusion of harmony. Yet beneath this veneer lay cracks, racial tensions simmering under the surface, ignored by many but felt deeply by those affected. For Marcus Johnson, a young black man who worked 2 jobs to support his family, Ridgewood wasn't the idyllic haven it appeared to be. Every encounter with law enforcement left him feeling scrutinized, judged before he even opened his mouth. One crisp autumn evening, Marcus pulled into the parking lot of a local convenience store after finishing his shift at the warehouse. The air smelled faintly of fallen leaves and the sky glowed orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. As he stepped out of his car, he noticed Officer Grayson's patrol vehicle parked nearby. Something about the sight made his stomach tighten. He'd seen Grayson around before, always watching, always lingering a little too long when black folks were involved. Marcus shook off the feeling and headed inside to grab milk and bread for breakfast the next morning. He exchanged pleasantries with the cashier, paid for his items, and walked back toward his car. That's when it happened. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Grayson leaning against his cruiser, arms crossed, eyes locked onto him. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Grayson pushed off the car and approached Marcus with deliberate steps. "Evening," Grayson said, his tone clipped. There was no warmth in his voice, only a cold formality that set Marcus on edge. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied, cautiously, clutching the grocery bag tightly. Grayson didn't respond immediately. Instead, he circled Marcus slowly, his gaze sweeping over him as though searching for something. Marcus stood still, trying to mask his discomfort. Finally, Grayson stopped in front of him, his expression unreadable. "You live around here?" Grayson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes, sir. Just a few blocks away." Grayson nodded but didn't say anything further. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic baggie. Inside were several white pills. Before Marcus could react, Grayson dropped the baggie into the open grocery sack Marcus held. "What are you doing?" Marcus stammered, panic rising in his chest. Grayson smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "I think we both know what I found here tonight." This opening sets the stage for conflict while introducing key characters and themes. It establishes tension between Marcus and Officer Grayson, hinting at larger systemic issues without resorting to explicit language or content. Marcus froze, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He stared at the plastic baggie now nestled among his groceries, its presence mocking him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could this be real? He hadn't touched anything illegal, hadn't even thought about it. Yet there it was, planted evidence staring back at him as if daring him to speak up. Officer Grayson's smirk widened, but there was no humor in it. It was cold, calculated, and filled with disdain. "You're coming with me," he said, flatly, reaching for the handcuffs attached to his belt. "No," Marcus protested, instinctively stepping back. "This isn't mine. You put that there. I didn't do anything wrong." Grayson's jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "I saw you drop it when you got out of your car. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." People passing by stopped to watch the scene unfold. Some looked curious, others glanced away uncomfortably. A few whispered among themselves, their voices low enough not to draw attention. None stepped forward to intervene. Marcus felt trapped, cornered not only by Grayson but also by the weight of fear pressing down on him. He knew better than to resist, it would only make things worse. Slowly, reluctantly, he complied, turning around and allowing Grayson to cuff him. Each click of the metal clasping around his wrists echoed loudly in his ears, sealing his fate. As Grayson led Marcus toward the patrol car, the young man tried again to plead his case. "Please, officer, listen to me. I work hard every day. I've never been in trouble before. This isn't fair." But Grayson ignored him, shoving him firmly into the back seat of the cruiser. The door slammed shut with finality, cutting off Marcus's protests. Inside the car, the air felt stifling, and the world outside seemed distant through the tinted windows. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt truly powerless. Back at the convenience store, word spread quickly. A few customers who had witnessed the incident began talking amongst themselves. One older woman shook her head disapprovingly. "That poor boy," she muttered under her breath. "He didn't look like someone who'd carried drugs." Her companion shrugged dismissively. "You never know these days. Better safe than sorry, right?" But not everyone shared that sentiment. Across the street, a teenager named Jamal stood watching silently, his fists clenched at his sides. He recognized Marcus. They weren't close friends, but they had grown up in the same neighborhood. Seeing Marcus taken away ignited a spark of anger within him. Something wasn't right here, and Jamal intended to find out more. Meanwhile, Grayson radioed the station to report the arrest. His voice was calm and professional, betraying none of the malice that had driven his actions. "Suspect apprehended," he said tersely. "Possession charges pending." At the police station, Marcus sat alone in a holding cell, his mind reeling. What would happen next? Would anyone believe him? Fear gnawed at him relentlessly, mixing with frustration and despair. He thought about his wife and 2 young children waiting for him at home. They depended on him, not just emotionally, but financially too. If he couldn't explain this away, how would they survive? Hours passed before an officer arrived to process him further. By then, Marcus had gone over every detail of the night repeatedly in his head, searching for answers, but the truth was stark and undeniable. He was caught in a web spun by someone far more powerful than him. Someone who believed he could get away with ruining lives without consequence. Little did Marcus or Grayson know, this moment would ripple outward, affecting far more people than either of them could imagine. And while Marcus sat helplessly, behind bars, questions began swirling in the community. Questions that wouldn't go unanswered forever. This part deepens the tension and explores the emotional toll on Marcus, while planting seeds of doubt and resistance in those around him. It keeps readers engaged by highlighting injustice and hinting at potential consequences yet to come. By morning, news of Marcus Johnson's arrest had spread like wildfire through Ridgewood. Word traveled quickly in a small town, especially when it involved something as shocking as drug possession charges against someone known to be hardworking and honest. At first, people whispered cautiously, unsure what to believe. But soon, opinions began to take shape. Some condemning Marcus without question, others questioning the circumstances surrounding his arrest. Jamal, the teenager who had witnessed the scene outside the convenience store, couldn't shake the image of Marcus being led away in handcuffs. It gnawed at him all night, keeping him awake long after his parents thought he was asleep. When dawn broke, Jamal decided he needed answers. He started by visiting Marcus's wife, Tanya, hoping she might know more. Tanya opened the door with red-rimmed eyes, her face etched with worry. She welcomed Jamal inside, though her voice trembled as she spoke. "I don't understand," she said, clutching a mug of coffee tightly between her hands. "Marcus doesn't do drugs. He wouldn't even let our kids watch movies with bad language. Why would he risk everything like this?" Jamal hesitated before responding. "I saw it happen, Mrs. Johnson. Officer Grayson, he put something in Marcus's grocery bag. I'm sure of it." Tanya's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she looked torn between hope and disbelief. Then anger flared in her eyes. "That man has always been trouble," she said bitterly. "He pulls Marcus over for no reason, gives him dirty looks whenever they cross paths. And now this? What are we supposed to do, Jamal? How can we fight someone like that?" Jamal didn't have an answer, but he promised to help however he could. As he left the house, his mind raced with possibilities. Maybe if enough people spoke up, someone would listen. Maybe justice still existed somewhere beneath the layers of fear and prejudice. Meanwhile, at the police station, Officer Grayson went about his duties with practiced indifference. To anyone watching, he appeared calm and collected, the picture of professionalism. Inside, however, doubt began creeping into his thoughts. Not guilt, not yet, but a nagging awareness that planting evidence wasn't foolproof. People talked, rumors spread. Could he really keep control of the narrative? At the local diner, where townsfolk gathered for breakfast and gossip, conversations buzzed around Marcus's case. Some defended Grayson, insisting that officers knew best and wouldn't frame an innocent person. Others weren't so convinced. Among them was Pastor Lewis, a soft-spoken man with a reputation for fairness. He leaned forward in his booth, addressing a group of regulars. "Folks, I've known Marcus since he was a boy," the pastor said gently. "He's not perfect, but he's never caused harm to anyone. If there's even a chance he's telling the truth, shouldn't we investigate further?" His words struck a chord with some listeners, particularly those who had experienced Grayson's bias firsthand. One woman nodded slowly. "My son got stopped twice last month for routine checks," she admitted. "Both times it felt wrong, like he was targeted because of how he looks." As the day wore on, whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs grew louder. A few brave souls approached Tanya, offering support and promising to attend Marcus's court hearing scheduled for later in the week. Even Jamal's older sister, Maya, joined the effort, using her social media influence to raise awareness about the situation. Her posts gained traction quickly, drawing attention from neighboring towns and sparking debates online. But not everyone rallied behind Marcus. Some residents clung stubbornly to their belief in law enforcement's infallibility. They dismissed accusations against Grayson as baseless attacks, accusing critics of undermining authority. Tensions simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over. For Marcus, trapped in a cell awaiting trial, time moved painfully slow. Each hour felt like days as he replayed the events leading to his arrest. He thought about Tanya and the kids wondering how they were coping without him. Most of all, he wondered whether anyone would believe his side of the story, or if Grayson's actions would define him forever. Unbeknownst to Marcus, the wheels of change were already turning. Small acts of courage were beginning to add up, creating momentum that neither Grayson nor anyone else could easily ignore. Justice might feel distant, but hope lingered. And sometimes hope was enough to spark a revolution. This section highlights the growing tension within the community, while emphasizing both resistance and division. It keeps readers engaged by showing how individual actions contribute to larger consequences, setting the stage for further developments. The Ridgewood Courthouse buzzed with energy on the morning of Marcus Johnson's hearing. Outside, a modest crowd had gathered, some holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "Truth over Bias." Inside, the air was thick with tension as people filled the benches, friends, family, neighbors, and curious onlookers who wanted to see how this case would unfold. The room felt smaller than usual, its wooden pews creaking under the weight of anticipation. Tanya sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together. Her eyes darted between the door where Marcus would enter and the judge's bench, which remained empty for now. Beside her, Jamal fidgeted nervously while Maya scrolled through her phone, checking social media updates about the trial. A few rows back, Pastor Lewis offered quiet words of encouragement to those around him, his calm presence a steadying force amidst the unease. When Marcus finally appeared, escorted by a bailiff, Tanya stood instinctively, tears welling up in her eyes. He looked tired but determined, his gaze scanning the room until it landed on his wife and children. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and an unspoken message passed between them. "We're in this together." Officer Grayson entered. Shortly after, his posture rigid and confident, he took his seat beside the prosecutor, a stern-looking woman named Linda Harper. She glanced at Grayson briefly before turning her attention to the judge, who had just entered the chamber. As everyone rose, the gravity of the situation settled heavily over the room. The proceedings began with formalities, but soon enough the prosecutor called Officer Grayson to the stand. Under questioning, Grayson recounted the events of the arrest with practiced precision. His voice was steady, his tone authoritative. He described finding the drugs in Marcus's grocery bag and emphasized his long record of service to the community. To many in the courtroom, he sounded credible, even convincing. But when the defense attorney, a young man named Ryan Caldwell, began cross-examination, cracks began to show. Caldwell pressed Grayson on inconsistencies in his story, asking pointed questions about why he hadn't followed standard protocol or documented the alleged discovery properly. "Isn't it true?" Caldwell asked, leaning forward slightly, "that you approached Mr. Johnson without probable cause? That no one else witnessed you finding these drugs?" Grayson hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I acted based on my training and experience," he replied curtly. "Sometimes officers have to make judgment calls." Caldwell nodded slowly, letting the statement hang in the air before moving on. "And isn't it also true that you've been accused of racial profiling in the past? Multiple complaints filed against you by members of the black community?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Grayson shot Caldwell a sharp look, but didn't deny the claim. Instead, he deflected. "Allegations are not proof," he said firmly. "My job is to enforce the law regardless of personal opinions." As the questioning continued, doubt began to creep into the minds of those watching. Even some of Grayson's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure what to think anymore. Tanya leaned closer to Jamal, whispering, "Do you think they'll believe us?" Jamal squeezed her hand reassuringly. "They have to." Finally, it was Marcus's turn to speak. When he stepped onto the stand, the room fell silent. His voice trembled at first, but as he spoke about his life, the sacrifices he made for his family, his dreams of providing a better future, he grew stronger. He recounted the night of his arrest in vivid detail, describing how Grayson had planted the evidence and ignored his protests. "I'm not perfect," Marcus admitted, looking directly at the jury, "but I work hard every day to be a good husband, father, and neighbor. I don't deserve this, not because of something I didn't do." His words resonated deeply with many in the room, especially those who knew him personally. Tears flowed freely from Tanya's eyes, and even Pastor Lewis wiped his cheek discreetly. For the first time since the ordeal began, hope flickered brightly in the hearts of Marcus's supporters. When the hearing adjourned for recess, the atmosphere outside the courthouse was electric. Conversations erupted everywhere, people debating what they'd seen and heard. Some were convinced of Marcus's innocence, others remained skeptical. But one thing was clear: the fight for justice wasn't over. It was only beginning. This section builds suspense by showcasing the emotional stakes of the hearing, while highlighting the growing divide among the townspeople. It keeps readers engaged by balancing moments of tension with glimpses of hope and resilience. As the days following the hearing stretched on, the tension in Ridgewood grew palpable. News of Marcus's testimony and Grayson's questionable behavior spread far beyond the courthouse walls, sparking heated discussions across the town. Some residents were moved by Marcus's heartfelt words, while others clung stubbornly to their belief that law enforcement could do no wrong. The divide deepened, splitting families, workplaces, and even friendships. For Marcus, life remained suspended in limbo. Though he had been released on bail pending the trial's outcome, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on him constantly. He tried to return to work, but whispers followed him wherever he went. His supervisor, wary of potential backlash, suggested Marcus take a leave of absence until things settle. It was a polite way of saying, stay out of sight. At home, Tanya did her best to shield their children from the storm raging outside, but it wasn't easy. Neighbors who once greeted them warmly now avoided eye contact or crossed the street to steer clear of awkward conversations. Even at school, Marcus's son, Elijah, faced taunts from classmates repeating rumors they'd overheard from their parents. "Your dad's a criminal," one boy sneered during recess, leaving Elijah in tears. Tanya consoled her son as best she could, but her patience was wearing thin. Each knock on the door made her heart race, fearing it might be another hateful note or worse, an anonymous threat. Late one night, as she sat alone in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea, she broke down sobbing. Marcus found her there, hunched over the table, her face buried in her hands. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Every day feels like we're under attack." Marcus knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. "We'll get through this," he said, though even he struggled to believe his own words. "People are starting to see the truth. We just have to hold on a little longer." Meanwhile, Officer Grayson faced mounting pressure of his own. Rumors about his conduct during the arrest continued to circulate, fueled by Maya's social media campaign and Pastor Lewis's sermons urging accountability. A few brave individuals came forward with stories of their own encounters with Grayson, traffic stops that felt excessive, searches without justification, dismissive attitudes laced with prejudice. These accounts painted a troubling pattern, one that couldn't be ignored forever. Still, Grayson refused to back down. At the police station, he doubled down on his version of events, insisting to his superiors that Marcus was guilty and that any accusations against him were baseless attempts to undermine authority. For a while it seemed like he might ride out the controversy unscathed, but cracks began forming within the department itself. Detective Sarah Chen, a veteran officer, known for her integrity, started asking uncomfortable questions. She reviewed Grayson's past cases, noticing inconsistencies and unresolved complaints that hadn't been properly investigated. When she approached the chief with her findings, he hesitated, torn between protecting the force's reputation and addressing growing public outrage. "You know as well as I do that something isn't right here," Sarah said firmly. "If we don't deal with this now, it's only going to get worse." The chief sighed, rubbing his temples. "I hear you, Sarah, but rocking the boat comes with risks. You think people will trust us more if we start pointing fingers at our own?" "It's not about trust," she replied sharply. "It's about doing what's right. If we don't, who will?" While tensions simmered behind closed doors, the community began organizing. Jamal and Maya spearheaded a rally planned for the weekend, inviting speakers from neighboring towns to share their experiences with systemic injustice. Flyers appeared on lampposts and storefront windows, urging residents to come together and demand change. Pastor Lewis offered the church as a meeting space, emphasizing unity over division. Grayson watched all of this unfold with growing unease. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind, not about his actions, but about whether he could silence the voices rising against him. He had always believed in his power to control situations, to bend outcomes to his will. But now, he realized, the tide was turning, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the midst of chaos, hope flickered faintly but persistently. People were waking up, speaking out, and refusing to stay silent. And though the road ahead promised challenges, Marcus and his supporters knew one thing for certain: they weren't backing down. This section highlights the emotional toll on both sides while escalating the conflict and setting the stage for decisive action. It keeps readers engaged by exploring personal struggles and collective resistance, reinforcing the story's themes of justice and resilience. The day of the rally arrived, and Ridgewood's town square transformed into a sea of faces united by a shared desire for truth and accountability. Hundreds of people gathered under cloudy skies, their voices mingling in chants of "No justice, no peace," and "Stand up, speak out." Jamal stood near the makeshift stage, his heart pounding with nervous excitement. Beside him, Maya adjusted the microphone, ensuring everything was ready for the speakers who would address the crowd. Marcus and Tanya arrived together, holding hands tightly as they navigated through the throng of supporters. For Marcus, the sight of so many people rallying for him was overwhelming. He had spent weeks feeling isolated, branded as a criminal despite his innocence. Now surrounded by friends, neighbors, and even strangers who believed in him, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Pastor Lewis opened the event with a prayer, his deep voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "We gather here today not out of anger," he began, "but out of love. For our community, for fairness, and for the belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Let us not lose sight of what brings us together." When Pastor Lewis stepped aside, Jamal took the stage, his youthful energy igniting the audience. "This isn't just about Marcus," he declared, gripping the sides of the podium. "It's about every person who's been judged before they've even spoken. It's about holding those in power accountable when they abuse it. We're here because silence isn't an option anymore." The crowd erupted in cheers, fueling Jamal's courage. He introduced the next speaker, a woman named Angela Rivera, from a nearby city who had successfully campaigned against police misconduct in her own community. Her story resonated deeply, especially when she described how small acts of resistance like attending rallies, signing petitions, and demanding transparency could lead to real change. As the speeches continued, Officer Grayson watched from a distance, hidden behind the tinted windows of his patrol car. His chest tightened as he listened to the passionate voices calling for justice. For years, he had dismissed such protests as meaningless noise, but now, doubt gnawed at him more fiercely than ever. Was this backlash truly deserved? Could he have gone too far? Inside the police station, tensions reached a boiling point. Detective Sarah Chen presented her findings to Chief Monroe, laying out evidence of Grayson's pattern of misconduct. She included testimonies from past victims, internal complaint records, and inconsistencies in his reports, all pointing to a troubling disregard for proper procedure. Chief Monroe hesitated, torn between protecting the department's image and doing what was right. "You can't ignore this," Sarah pressed, her tone firm but respectful. "If we don't address it, the public won't trust us. And honestly, Chief, do you want to stand by while someone abuses their badge like this?" After a long pause, Monroe sighed heavily. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll launch an internal investigation. But if this blows up, we'll both be answering for it." Back at the rally, Marcus stepped onto the stage for the first time, greeted by thunderous applause. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But seeing all of you gives me strength. This fight isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever been wronged, silenced, or ignored. Together we can make sure no one else has to go through what my family is going through." His words struck a chord, leaving many in tears. As the rally concluded, people vowed to keep pushing forward, to attend court hearings, write letters to local officials, and refuse to let the issue fade away. Even some who had initially doubted Marcus began reconsidering their stance, swayed by the passion and determination of the movement. For Grayson, the writing was on the wall. That evening, he returned home alone, haunted by the realization that his actions might finally catch up with him. The once unshakable officer now faced the prospect of losing everything he had worked for, and worse, being exposed as the flawed man he truly was. Change was coming to Ridgewood, slow but steady. The question remained, would it come soon enough to save Marcus and others like him from further harm? This section builds momentum toward resolution by showcasing collective action and moral reckoning. It keeps readers engaged by blending emotional moments with escalating stakes, setting the stage for the final chapter. Weeks turned into months as the investigation into Officer Grayson's conduct unfolded. The internal probe, led by Detective Sarah Chen, revealed damning evidence that could no longer be ignored. Complaints dating back years painted a clear picture of bias and misconduct, culminating in the events surrounding Marcus Johnson's arrest. Chief Monroe faced immense pressure from both within the department and the public to take decisive action. Finally, after days of deliberation, Grayson was suspended pending further review and ultimately dismissed from the force. The news sent shockwaves through Ridgewood. For many, it was a long overdue reckoning. For others, it served as a painful, reminder of how deeply rooted prejudice could fester unchecked. Grayson retreated from public life, his reputation shattered. Though justice had been served in one sense, the scars he left behind would linger for years. Meanwhile, Marcus's trial reached its climax. With overwhelming community support and mounting evidence of Grayson's wrongdoing, the jury delivered a verdict that brought tears of relief to Tanya's eyes. Not guilty. As Marcus stood to hear the decision, his legs trembled beneath him, but his spirit soared. He hugged his family tightly, overwhelmed by gratitude, not just for the outcome, but for the people who had stood by him when hope seemed distant. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted as supporters celebrated the victory. Jamal raised his fist triumphantly, while Maya captured the moment on her phone, sharing it with thousands online. Pastor Lewis addressed the crowd once more, urging them to channel their energy into lasting change. "This is a step forward," he said, "but we must remain vigilant. Justice isn't something we achieve once, it's something we strive for every day." In the weeks that followed, Ridgewood began to heal. Conversations about racial bias and accountability became part of everyday discourse, encouraged by workshops hosted at the church and town hall meetings, spearheaded by activists like Jamal and Maya. The police department implemented new training programs focused on ethics and cultural sensitivity, thanks in large part to Detective Chen's advocacy. Slowly but surely, trust between law enforcement and the community started to rebuild. For Marcus and his family, life slowly returned to normal, but it was a new kind of normal. They emerged stronger, bonded not only by love but also by resilience. Marcus found work at a local warehouse again, this time greeted warmly by colleagues who admired his courage. Tanya joined a support group for families affected by injustice, using her experience to help others navigate similar struggles. As for Grayson, his fall from grace weighed heavily on him. Stripped of his badge and ostracized by former peers, he spent countless nights reflecting on his choices. Pride had blinded him, leading him down a path of harm. One evening, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, he penned an apology letter, not expecting forgiveness, but hoping to acknowledge the damage he had caused. It was a small gesture, but it marked the beginning of his journey toward redemption. Ridgewood wasn't perfect. Wounds took time to mend, and progress came in fits and starts. But the town proved resilient, emerging from adversity with renewed purpose. People learned that standing up against injustice required unity, persistence, and unwavering belief in what was right. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus walked his children to school, holding Elijah's hand as they crossed the street. Neighbors waved hello, their smiles genuine. Looking around, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for his family, for his community, and for the courage it took to fight for truth. Though shadows of the past remained, they were softened by the light of hope, a reminder that even in darkness change was possible, and so Ridgewood moved forward, carrying lessons learned into a brighter future. This final section ties together loose ends while emphasizing themes of growth, accountability, and hope. It leaves readers with a satisfying conclusion while reinforcing the importance of collective effort in overcoming systemic challenges.